They thought they could take everything from me. My land. My family's name. 47 years of sweat and calluses. All with one forged signature. It was a Thursday. Late June. I remember because the heat was crawling across the back of my neck while I was out by the barn, fixing the fence that kept the elk from trampling the sorghum. Nothing unusual. Just another day trying to keep the farm from falling apart faster than I could patch it. Then the phone rang. I figured it might be Hank down at the feed store. Or maybe my sister nagging me about coming into town for her birthday barbecue. But it wasn't either of them. It was Sam Grayson. My lawyer. Ben, he said. Voice tight. We've got a problem. I stopped tightening the wire and leaned against a fence post. What kind of problem? The Oak River Trails HOA is claiming they've acquired your land. Says there was a sale 6 months ago. I laughed. Loud and sharp. That's a good one. Sam. I never sold a damn thing. I know. But they've got paperwork. A transfer of ownership. Stamped. Signed. Signed by who? You. For a second, I thought he was joking. But Sam never joked about legal filings. You need to come down to the clerk's office, he said. Bring anything you've got that proves ownership. I hung up and walked back toward the house, my boots kicking up dust. As I passed the porch, my eyes landed on the flagpole out front. The stars and stripes my dad raised the day he came home from Vietnam still flew there. He used to say that pole was the spine of our property. You pull it out, everything falls. That flag's been waving since 1972. And I wasn't about to let some paperwork-wielding HOA crook lower it. An hour later, I was standing inside the Caldera County Clerk's office. The building hadn't changed in 40 years. Same cracked linoleum. Same buzz from the overhead fluorescents. Sam was already inside, flipping through a file the size of a phone book. This, he said, pointing to a notarized form, is the official sales agreement. 1.500 acres of your farmland, transferred to Oak River Trails HOA. According to this, you signed it 6 months ago. He handed it to me. The signature looked like mine, but not quite. It was cleaner, too smooth, like someone had practiced it off a photocopy. I held it up to the light. This is a forgery, I said, my voice low and flat. Sam nodded. I thought the same. But look at this. He slid another paper across the table. This one was a deed transfer to a developer, Suncrest Developments. They build cookie-cutter homes and sell them for a fortune to people who think a cul-de-sac is the American dream. They already flipped it, Sam said. Construction's scheduled to start August 3rd. That hit harder than the fake signature. I felt my jaw tighten. My fists ball up. I'd seen Oak River creeping closer over the years. Their little beige palaces lining up like dominoes on the edge of my property. But I never imagined they'd be bold enough to come for my land. My land was more than soil and crops. It was the smell of diesel on my dad's overalls. The front porch where my mom used to sit every evening with her sweet tea. The creaky floorboards in the farmhouse that still groaned the same way they did when I was 6. This land was my family. My story. And someone had stolen it. Who signed off on this fraud? I asked. Sam pointed at the bottom of the document. President of the HOA, Daniel Layton. Notarized by his wife, Wendy. Daniel Layton. That smug little weasel had been a thorn in my side since the day he moved into Oak River. Sent me letters about the aesthetic impact of my tractor barn. Filed noise complaints about my cattle during calving season. Claimed the dust from my field affected property values. I'd ignored him because I figured men like that weren't worth my time. But this wasn't just petty complaints. This was war. We can take this to court, Sam said, his voice low. You've got the original deed. That sale's fraudulent. We can have it overturned. But you need to be ready. They're not going to back down easy. I stared at the fake signature again. Noticed how the loop on the J curled the wrong way. They think this is over, I said. Sam raised an eyebrow. It's not. I shook my head. No, Sam. It's just getting started. I didn't sleep that night. After I got home from the county office, I went straight to the mudroom and pulled out every box of paperwork my father had left behind. Some of those folders hadn't seen daylight in over 30 years, dusty, brittle things with curled corners and faded labels. But my gut told me something was in there. Something that could turn all of this around. It was nearly 3 in the morning when I found it, a thin, yellowing envelope buried beneath a stack of tax returns from the 80s. Written in my dad's rough handwriting were the words, "Inheritance Transfer, 1986. I opened it with hands that weren't quite steady at first. It was exactly what I expected, confirmation of the 1.500 acres that had always been ours. Same parcel we'd plowed, planted, and walked for 3 generations. But then I saw something else. Something I didn't remember ever hearing about, parcel 23B. It was a second deed. Quieter, older, and way more important than I realized at first glance. I laid it flat on the kitchen table, then went digging for the old county zoning maps. By the time the sun was rising, I had half the table covered in overlapping pages and hand-drawn borders. Took me a while to match it all up. But once I did, I sat back in my chair and just stared. There it was. A full 300-acre stretch of land, still in my family's name, had been sitting untouched for decades. It wasn't part of the active farmland, which explained why we never talked about it. But it had never been sold, never transferred. And most importantly, it sat directly beneath the northern half of Oak River Trails. The HOA that tried to rip my land out from under me had been sitting on my land all along. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or punch a hole in the wall. I settled on grabbing my keys. I didn't call ahead. Just drove straight into town and parked outside Sam's law office, tires crunching across the gravel. He looked up from his desk as I stormed through the door. Folders under my arm and hell in my eyes. "Morning to you too," he said, raising an eyebrow. I dropped the documents on his desk. "Read." He flipped through them, eyes scanning fast. When he hit the second deed, the one for parcel 23B, his whole face changed. "Where did you get this?" "My dad's files." It was buried. He grabbed the county zoning map from the cabinet behind him, lined it up with the deeds. We both stared in silence. "If this is right," he said slowly, "then your land extends through the northern half of Oak River, including the HOA clubhouse." I finished. "And about 60 homes." He leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "Ben, this changes everything. If that land was never legally transferred, then every deed in that zone is invalid." "That's what I figured." Sam looked at me. "You realize what this means, right? You could file a claim tomorrow and legally take back everything. Houses, streets, playgrounds, all of it." I nodded. "Slow. They forged a signature and tried to erase my name from my own land. This isn't about getting even anymore, Sam. This is about taking it all back." He didn't say anything right away. Just sat there, tapping the edge of the desk with his pen. "Are you sure you want to go this far?" I thought about my dad raising the flag out front every Sunday morning. I thought about my mother's rose bushes blooming along the fence. I thought about Daniel Layton's smug face the day he told me to keep my equipment behind the aesthetic line. I'm sure. The next 48 hours, I didn't leave the house. I turned my kitchen into a war room. Maps, documents, family records spread across the table like a battlefield. I marked every boundary, every overlap, every legal inconsistency. The deeper I went, the clearer it all became. That 300-acre stretch had been right there in the records the whole time. But Oak River's developers? They'd either skipped a few steps or didn't care enough to check. Either way, their mistake was my golden ticket. And the best part? They had no idea. I remember standing at the back porch that night, looking out at the wheat fields glowing under the moonlight. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just angry. I was something else, ready. They thought they'd buried me in bureaucracy. Turns out, They dug their own grave. From the outside looking in, I must have seemed like a man scrambling to save what little he had left. I started showing up to HOA meetings, yes. Me. The man who once swore he'd never step foot in their fancy clubhouse unless it was on fire. I let them see me angry. Let them hear me plead. I stood up at the town hall meeting on July 12th. Voice raised. Red in the face. Demanding to know how they could sell my land without even telling me. Daniel Layton. That smug jackass in his pressed blazer and HOA name tag. Leaned over the microphone and said, Mr. Holbrook. The association acted within its legal authority. If you have complaints, please direct them through proper channels. I looked around the room at the other homeowners, watching them nod politely as if I were just another angry relic refusing to adapt to progress. Some of them even laughed. One woman whispered behind her hand, "Why doesn't he just take the settlement and move on?" And I let them think that's all I had left, noise and stubbornness. But behind the scenes, I was preparing to burn the whole thing down. While they were filing fake sale papers and drafting up home expansions, I was filing real claims, quietly. I submitted the official land ownership verification for parcel 23B through the county registrar's office. I made sure it got processed without raising any flags. No press. No drama. Just a single page, signed and notarized, stating that the land Oak River had built their homes on still belonged to Benjamin Holbrook. Then I started talking to people. Not the HOA loyalists who baked cookies for meetings and obsessed over trash bin placement. No. I talked to folks who had been steamrolled by the board, people like Lisa Mendoza. Lisa was one of the first buyers in Oak River's expansion. Nice lady. Loved her hummingbirds and her lavender bushes. But the HOA fined her 3 times for having a non-compliant garden border. They made her repaint her front door because it was too bold. When I told her what I had found, she nearly dropped her teacup. "You're telling me my house might not even be on legal ground?" I nodded. "And the HOA knows. They've known since the first zoning meeting 4 years ago. There's a line in their board minutes, buried, but it's there." She didn't even hesitate. She handed me every violation notice she'd ever received. Emails. Letters. Even a voicemail from Daniel telling her to watch her tone. By the end of the week, I had 5 more homeowners just like her. Each one gave me a piece of the puzzle. Each one knew something was off. But none of them had put it together, until now. Then came the real insult. One morning, I walked out to the edge of my property and stopped dead in my tracks. My fence, the one I just reinforced a month ago, was gone. Torn clean down. In its place, planted right in the red dirt like a middle finger, was a brand new Oak River HOA sign, future site of Oak River Recreation Trail. Private property. No trespassing. I stood there a long time. Just still, watching the wind flap that smug little sign back and forth. Then I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. Sent it to Sam with one line, "They're getting cocky." He called me back 5 minutes later. "What's the plan?" "We let them bury themselves," I said. The next 3 weeks were excruciating. Every day I got another violation letter in the mailbox. One for the tractor sitting too close to the road. One for the dog barking at night. One because my front porch light exceeded acceptable brightness standards. I kept them all. And every night, I added another file to my growing stack: pictures, timestamps, emails, receipts. I even hired a retired deputy named Carl to sit in his truck with a camera near the clubhouse parking lot. He caught Daniel Layton and a couple of his board members bragging at a wine night about how they were finally getting rid of that old coot with the fence and the cornfield. They laughed. I didn't. Then, finally, it came. A thick envelope in the mailbox, sealed with that pretentious gold HOA emblem. Inside was a final notice of land acquisition, signed by Daniel himself. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that I was trespassing on land now owned by Oak River Trails Development. and that construction would begin on October 1st. They even had the gall to threaten me with legal action if I interfered. I read the letter twice, then I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the porch steps. Because what they didn't know was that just a week earlier, my land claim had been verified and recorded at the county clerk's office. Parcel 23B, along with all 300 acres under their overpriced sidewalks and potted palms, now sat in official legal limbo. Notices were scheduled to go out within the next 5 days to every homeowner whose house sat on disputed ground. I imagined Daniel reading his own letter from the county. I imagined the look on his face. They thought I was a stubborn farmer holding on to a fading legacy. But what I was really doing was loading the last round into the chamber. And I was about to pull the trigger. It started with a whisper. The first calls went out the following Tuesday morning. A few homeowners from the northern end of Oak River Trails, those with houses closest to my fence line, received official notices from the Caldera County Recorder's Office. The letters were short, clinical. They simply stated that the land beneath their homes was now under legal review due to a contested ownership claim, and that any real estate activity, buying, selling, refinancing, was to be put on immediate hold pending investigation. By noon, the HOA office phones were ringing off the hook. By 4 p.m., Daniel Layton was pacing outside the clubhouse, his cell glued to his ear, sweat bleeding through the back of his golf shirt. I watched him from my truck parked across the street, sipping coffee, letting the chaos play out. Lisa Mendoza called me that night, panicked. "Ben, I just got off the phone with my mortgage company. They froze my refinance application. They said the land under my house might not be mine." "They're right," I said. She was silent a long time. Then, "Thank you for not letting this go." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The next day, the story made the local paper. Subdivision under legal siege, homeowners face uncertain future after land ownership dispute emerges. By Thursday, real estate agents were canceling open houses in Oak River. The MLS listings for affected properties were pulled. No bank would touch the neighborhood. No buyer would risk it. And that was just the beginning. Friday morning, a group of residents stormed the HOA office demanding answers. Lisa was there. So was Tony Herrera, the retired Air Force mechanic who'd lived on Birchwood Lane since 2009. They shouted through the glass, waved letters in Daniel's face, demanded explanations. Daniel tried to stall. He blamed an administrative misunderstanding, said everything would be resolved soon. But his face told a different story. Pale, wild-eyed, the man looked like he hadn't slept in days. And then came the lawsuits. First, a young couple who had just closed on their home 2 months earlier, Jeremy and Megan Price, filed suit against the HOA for fraud and emotional distress. Their lender pulled out of their mortgage, and their insurance policy was voided. They blamed the HOA for failing to disclose the land dispute, and they had receipts. More followed. Each lawsuit peeled another layer off the HOA's shiny exterior. But the real gut punch, Suncrest Developments, the same company that had bought the land from the HOA, turned around and sued them for breach of contract and fraudulent conveyance. Their legal team claimed that the HOA had sold them land it didn't legally own, and they wanted $2 million in damages. Sam called me after the lawsuit was filed. "They're bleeding. Ben," he said. "Their reserve fund can't cover this. Let it bleed." I replied. By the end of that week, the HOA board called for an emergency community meeting, something they'd never done before. Word spread fast. And by the time I walked into the clubhouse, the place was packed. Standing room only. Neighbors lined the walls, fanning themselves with printed violation notices, their faces twisted with confusion and rage. Daniel stood at the front, his posture stiff, shirt collar damp. "We are working closely with legal counsel," he said into the mic. "Rest assured, this is a temporary issue and does not reflect any wrongdoing. You told us this land was clean." A man in the back shouted, "I sunk my life savings into this house. My deal just fell through because of you." A woman snapped, waving her phone in the air. Another man, red-faced and loud, yelled, "I want my HOA dues back. Every damn penny." Daniel's voice cracked. "Please, let's remain civil." That's when I stepped forward. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I tried to warn you," I said, standing in the center aisle, every eye turning toward me. "You didn't listen. You thought I was just some old farmer clinging to dirt and pride. But what you didn't realize is that dirt has a name on it. And that name is mine." Daniel froze. I held up a thick folder. The official documents I'd filed weeks ago. This land was never yours to sell. Never yours to build on. Never yours to rule. And now? Now it's time to face the consequences. The room erupted. Not in cheers. Not yet. But in something better. Realization, fear, accountability. Daniel tried to speak again, but his voice was drowned out. I turned and walked out as fast as I came in. Past the people who used to sneer at me. Past the ones who used to pretend I didn't exist. They weren't sneering now. The dominoes had started to fall, and there was no stopping them. By the following Monday, Oak River Trails wasn't a neighborhood anymore, it was a sinking ship. The HOA office was dark. No one answered the phones. No one responded to emails. People started leaving handwritten notes on the clubhouse door, pleading for answers, demanding refunds. Some even started posting signs in their yards, "HOA lied to us." But I wasn't done, not by a damn mile. I had waited. Patiently. I'd let them laugh. Let them send me threats. Fine me for things like leaving my porch light on past 9 p.m. I played the dumb, angry old man while they built their fake little empire on stolen ground. And now, it was time to crush them with everything I had. That morning, I filed the final lawsuit. It was a civil claim, but it had teeth, backed by county-verified deeds, inheritance records, and over 24 recorded violations of property law. I wasn't just suing the HOA. I was naming names: Daniel Layton, Wendy Layton, Treasurer Alan Brooks, Secretary Karen Fulton. By lunchtime, process servers were hand-delivering papers to their doors. Daniel's house, the big one with the red-tiled roof and 4-car garage, was the first stop. I made sure he got his paperwork before noon. Before the media did. By mid-afternoon, every local news outlet had picked up the story. One even interviewed Lisa Mendoza right there on her porch. She held up her HOA fine binder for the camera and said, "This isn't about lawn height or mailbox colors anymore. This is about power, abuse, and a man who stood up to it." That man was me. The developer's lawsuit had already drained what was left of the HOA's reserve fund, with mine added on top, and a stack of new lawsuits piling in from furious homeowners. They didn't have a prayer. Mortgages were frozen. Homeowners' insurance policies were revoked. Real estate agents blacklisted the entire subdivision. You couldn't sell a house in Oak River even if you were giving it away for free. And then I made my next move. I announced that Parcel 23B, the disputed land underneath half the neighborhood, was now for sale. Not the homes, just the land. If residents wanted to stay, they'd have to buy the ground beneath their feet at market price. The calls started that same night. Some were angry. Some were desperate. People begged for more time, better terms. One woman even offered me home-baked pies if I would cut her a deal. But most couldn't afford it. Daniel Layton was the first to fall. He tried to fight the foreclosure, claiming his position in the HOA granted him special protection. His attorney showed up to court with a binder full of procedural nonsense. But it didn't matter. His house was sitting on land he didn't own. The judge ruled in my favor in under 10 minutes. I showed up the day he moved out. Parked across the street. He avoided looking at me as he loaded his furniture into a moving van. No more suits. No more smug smiles. Just a man who'd built his kingdom on sand and was watching the tide roll in. The rest fell just as fast. Karen Fulton's home was auctioned off to a commercial storage developer. Alan Brooks disappeared overnight. Some residents tried to organize a Save the Neighborhood fundraiser online. But it fizzled fast. No one wants to donate money to keep living on disputed land with no HOA backing and no legal clarity. Week by week, house by house, Oak River trails unraveled. By early fall, half the neighborhood was empty. The once pristine lawns were overgrown. The HOA signs were pulled down and dumped in the trash. The clubhouse stood abandoned, windows boarded up. I walked past it one morning on my way to inspect the new fence I was building. A real fence. One with barbed wire and corner posts and no ridiculous color scheme rules. My land. My rules. Some of the people who'd mocked me before, who voted for Daniel, who turned a blind eye while I was fined and harassed, showed up at my door. Mr. Holbrook, please. We've lived here for years. We didn't know what the board was doing. We just want to stay. They looked me in the eye the same way they used to when they handed me violation notices with forced smiles. And I gave them the exact answer they gave me back when I begged them to stop. Rules are rules. It took less than a year for Oak River Trails to vanish. The neighborhood that once boasted about its manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and tight-knit community values was now a ghost town. Street signs faded under the sun. Bushes grew wild over the old jogging paths. A cracked HOA sign still clung to one of the stone pillars at the subdivision's entrance. But the letters had peeled away, leaving only the outline of what once was. I walked the empty roads sometimes. Not out of spite. Just to remember. By winter, most of the houses had been demolished. A few were sold off to investors and turned into storage units or office spaces. Others were bulldozed to make room for what the land was always meant to hold: fields, pastures, life. Where the clubhouse once stood, I planted sunflowers. Not out of symbolism. I just liked sunflowers. And they thrived in that soil. Like they knew something had been set right. The county approved a permit for a seasonal farmer's market on the southern edge of the property. Kids from town came out on weekends to pick strawberries, pet goats, buy jam from a stand I built out of salvaged barnwood. Some of the folks who had sided with me early on, like Lisa Mendoza, came back. Not as neighbors, but as friends. But I kept a part of the land untouched. Quiet. Just a wide, open field with no fences and no signs. I'd walk there with Buck, my old hound, every evening. Same as I did with my dad when I was a boy. We'd watch the sun go down behind the ridge, feel the wind roll off the dry grass, and just breathe. For the first time in years, there were no letters in my mailbox. No threats. No HOA patrol driving past with clipboards and judgment. Just the rhythm of the seasons and the sound of things healing. They tried to take everything from me, my farm, my name, my peace. But all they did was remind me who I was. What this land was. What it would always be. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about respect. For legacy. For boundaries. For the dirt under your boots that doesn't come with a QR code or a zoning overlay. And if there's one thing I learned through it all, it's this: land remembers. It remembers who tilled it, who lied about it, and who came home to reclaim it. I stood on my porch one evening, just as the sun dipped behind the last of the mesquite trees. Buck was stretched out at my feet, snoring. The flag out front, torn once, now stitched and steady, fluttered in the breeze. It had flown there since 1972, and it would keep flying long after every last trace of Oak River Trails was gone. Because the land was mine again. And this time, no one would ever take it from me.